also possible for you to be killed and to go into the grave. And so he descends, not only as human, he descends into the grave and into death. And then the whole discussion of descending into hell. It's like, could you go any further down our Almighty God? And the point Jesus is making is, I descended and rose so you could ascend. He said again, and this was all put in place before the earth was even made. If we go back to the first chapter of Ephesians, this is all part of my plan. I know what I'm doing. And I did this so you could have a relationship with me. One who brings nothing to the table can be full of Jesus Christ and be everything, because he is everything. But this is what it took for me to have a relationship with you. So I descended so I could have a relationship with you. And he's reminding us, okay, you saw what I did. This is my plan. He said, now you're going to need that meekness, and you're going to need that humility, and you're going to need that patience, and you're going to need to bear with love one another, because as he's going on in chapter 4, he says, I'm about to show you what it looks like when you walk with me. Because our tendency is to push back against the humility and the meekness. To say, God will say one thing, well, God, there's probably a better way of doing it. Jesus is like, you bring nothing, I bring everything. You don't bring something into this relationship that makes the relationship better. I'm the one who makes the relationship better. And if I am in you, what's the wonderful thing you bring to this relationship now? Me. Because I am in you. He said, and we want to say, well, God says, we'll do this. And he's like, well, Lord, this seems like a better. No, remember what I've done. I'm trying to fill you to overflowing. And it happens where we just want to push back on what God says. I even saw this person who, they say they're a pastor. There's a clip that this Christian showed of what's being preached today, where this pastor said, no, God lied to Adam and Eve, so it's okay for Eve to lie to God. I'm like, what? But people like the idea of a falling God, because then he must be wrong in other areas. This is how far we'll push to try and say what we think is right. This is a person who calls himself a preacher who has not emptied himself unto Jesus Christ or its congregation, to teach them to empty themselves. It is the ultimate of the selfish, egotistical way we can be when we think our way is better than God's. And God's setting this all up, Paul's setting this up, saying, okay, now, Jesus is like, okay, what I have so you have life to the fullest. And then he jumps in to verses 11 through 14. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds and teachers to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves, carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Jesus said, I am setting up the church where the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers are teaching you my way. That is their job, and this is how I'm putting it upon them. And Jesus talks about the gifts. Now, I love the gifts, and they're hugely abused. But why I love the gifts? What are the gifts? It's Jesus. It's not enough that Jesus says, okay, I can have this relationship with you. I am in you, and my Spirit's in you. And people say, well, I would like to see more of Jesus. Well, Jesus, well, I'm going to do these gifts that show you even more of me. But yet, we have this wonderful ability to make it about us. Last week I shared how a woman who couldn't have babies, she had tumors and she had to go in for an operation. So I went in, I prayed with the family, I prayed for her. I left, I got called 10 minutes later, and the doctor says the tumors were all gone. It was a miracle. The husband called me. The husband did not say, Jim, you healed my wife. He did not say that. If he did, I would have corrected him. He called me and said, Jesus Christ just healed my wife. That gift showed up and Jesus was glorified. Now, today's way, what I'm supposed to do is get a plaque over my office that says, Faith Healer Jim. Come see Faith Healer Jim. I am not a faith healer. Jesus does it, and he uses a gift when he wants to use it, so he is glorified. It does not like, I care, oh, Jim, you pray for one person healed, so everyone you pray for is going to be healed. No, Jesus decides. And he gives us these gifts so he is seen even greater and more wonderfully. And he's using it with the idea here of the apostles and the prophets. And what I found intriguing is I wanted to see, what did this mean in Paul's day? It was actually hard to research it when he's talking about apostles and prophets and evangelists and shepherds and teachers, or pastor and teacher. And I found this one writer who wrote about, here's how they were doing it then, is the evangelists worked with the apostle. And so they find a place that didn't know Jesus Christ, and the evangelists went in, sharing Christ. Behind him came the apostle and the prophets to start working with the people, to start forming the church. And then they sent in the pastor and the teachers behind them so the people could grow in the Lord. They were all working together for God's kingdom, to edify the people. Nowadays, we sort of have evangelists who go in and say, no, come on, accept Jesus Christ. 5,000 people came to Christ, and then they leave. And there's no one there to walk with them and edify them. Somehow, the evangelists separate themselves from the apostles and from the pastors and the teachers. But they were always working together, so the people would be edified in the way of the Lord and grow. Now, the apostle is an ambassador of Christ. They were ones that saw the resurrected Jesus Christ, commissioner of Christ. God also did incredible miracles through these guys who were doing the apostle stuff. We see what Paul did, and Peter, and James, and John, and Bartholomew, and Thaddeus, how the miraculous things happened with these guys, in which we saw with the apostles. We now have what we call the office of the apostle, which is sort of the realm I fall into. Apostles are basically that the office of it, we start things. God calls us, he works in us and through us. And so, like, I planted a church because I start things. And then I helped plant a biker church. And then I planted a house church ministry. It's what I do because Jesus has pointed me in that way and has gifted me that way, that he will show up in that way. And then even when I took this church, one reason I took it is it needs to change. And I start things. So I sort of fall into a little of that. And the evangelist, I tell you, we're all supposed to evangelize. We're all called to share Jesus Christ. But I'll say what God does with these evangelists is quite remarkable. I've known a few in my life. I've been good friends with some. They almost seem, they don't have the ability not to share Christ. They cannot share Christ. I have sat with them in many places. I mean, we're at a restaurant, they just start sharing Christ with everyone around them. We're at a gas station, they start sharing, while they're pumping gas, they're sharing Christ with the guy next to him who's pumping gas. He says, it's a great time. He can't go anywhere, he has to pump his gas. These people just, they can't keep Christ to themselves. They have to give Christ away. And it's a remarkable, you realize Jesus is working in them. And you see Jesus just working, and it's quite remarkable. And my friend Tom, who's a strong evangelist, and when he was called to be a pastor, I said, you realize You now can't play that role. You're now the pastor, which means your job is to come and edify, build up, and teach. I said, you're going to have to put away some of that evangelist stuff as you do it now, because you guys now concentrate, because the pastor and the teacher are there to walk with, have them grow and develop. And part of that killed him, because all the evangelists see is the lost. And that's great. They said, well, if I spend time developing them, I'm going to miss the 10,000 who still need Jesus. It's a beautiful thing. I told Tom, you're going to have to find someone like me, because you were evangelizing and you threw them to me. We were working together. You threw them to me, and I taught them. And God says, this is how I'm setting up my church, how it works, how I want it there. And the prophets, and oh man, the prophets one, I really don't like talking on, because that is a really abused one. Prophets love to say, and God told me, and I love it when a prophet's wrong, then you're not a prophet. The whole idea of the prophet is the edification of the church about Jesus Christ. There's no prophecy given that's not going to be about Jesus Christ and edifying his church. And that gets so abused now. Then we have the pastor, the shepherd, or teacher. Some say shepherd and teacher. Some say, well, that meant one. Some say it meant two. But if the pastor isn't teaching, I don't know what he's supposed to be doing. But there's people more gifted in it. Pastor Mike is a better teacher than I am. There's something about that God works, Jesus works in him in this wonderful way when it comes to teaching. And if you spend any time with Mike, you're just going to see Jesus. And he does it with the teaching, and he's got an ability here that I do not have. I can do it, but not like him. And Jesus is like, I am working through each of these people that you would learn, that you would see me, and you'd grow me. And what's the reason for all of this? And we get to verses 12 and 14, to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, not staying young, but to mature manhood, womanhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves, carried away by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Satan is the king of deception. There is no one better at it than Satan. He deceives so well. And Jesus is like, you're here to grow, in the body to be strong, so you're not conned anymore. And it's out there. I mean, what we do, the mistake we make is we'll read authors who could be good, but then all of a sudden we start following the writer instead of Jesus Christ. We follow the latest wave of Christianity instead of following Jesus Christ. In my 30 years of ministry, I have seen so many waves come and go, but you know what? Jesus has stayed constant. But we fell into the trap. It's easy to fall into it. Matter of fact, I was listening to a podcast. These guys were talking about Revelation. I was really enjoying them. They're sound in the Word. They know their stuff, and it was fun listening to them. But they even started off wrong, where they fall into the world and what the world tells you what it should look like. And the two main guys, one was the mentor, one was the mentee, very bright men who know their stuff. And the mentor starts off by saying, no, the mentee, he's done great work for the Lord. He loves Jesus Christ. He said, when he came to his church, there's 80 people. And now this last Easter, there was 1,150. He's really, a great Christian. And I'm like, I wanted to talk to him in a moment. I said, so he has a good number, then he's a great Christian. Under that logic, Joel Osteen is a great man of God, because he's got 30,000. Well, Joel Osteen's theology is paper thin. He has like no Christology. I call him a motivational speaker and a great encourager, but he doesn't even bring Jesus Christ up in his messages. But this mentor slipped into, well, if you have these numbers, then you're a good man of God. And then I even know if I confronted him on it, he's like, no, that's not what I meant. I said, yeah, I know, but we slip into that to the measuring tape that we use for what is a good man or woman of God, leaving what Jesus says is a good man or a good woman of God. It's so easy to do. And Jesus is like, keep it coming back to me. Remember, I descended and took away all the barriers so you could be with me. And then I ascended so you can ascend. Don't get trapped into this stuff of the world that sounds so good, because we have enough conferences out there between the leadership conferences and the revival conferences, the youth conferences, the pastor conferences, the worship conferences. Matter of fact, Kristen was talking about doing this thing, and she's working on with a friend, and she's like, rejoicing or redeeming. And she said, there's so many of these conferences, I don't even want to use those words. I'm afraid to use these words. And because we inundate it with the way it's going to happen is a conference. And Jesus Christ is lost in all of it. I had a friend once a pastor friend came back from a conference. He's very excited, very pumped. He was talking about, this is a number of years ago, well, this conference is great. We're finding out how to use new technology, how to set up your lights the right way and how to use the smoke machines the right way. And he's going on and on and on. And I'm just sitting there smiling at him. And I looked at him after he got done explaining how great it was. I said, could you answer one question? He said, yeah. What did they say about Jesus Christ in this conference? And he just stopped and looked at me. Because I'm hearing a lot of techie stuff and all that, which is not bad, per se. Where was Jesus mentioned at this conference? And he just sat there for a while. He says, you know what? I guess he really wasn't mentioned too much. I'm like, yeah. I said, we can lose him in all this stuff. And that is how Satan throws, we get thrown to and fro. Just these little things. Because it was a conference, and it wasn't like an evil conference, but it's so easy to lose Jesus in all of it. And Jesus, remember what I've gone through so you can have a relationship with me. How I keep opening these doors so you can have a relationship with me. The things that can happen as we walk together. And if you can do this, he said the results are, let me go down more. In verse 15, rather speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. This is such a beauty, when every joint is doing what they're supposed to be doing in the Lord, as the Lord guides it, as the pastors are doing what God has called them to do, and the evangelists and the prophets and the apostles, in each of us, as we're called to do, doing what God has put on us, made us to do, equipped us to do, so He's glorified. And this is really neat because we had a great example of this just this week. Raylan was very moved by this incantation spell thing that was happening in Covington. And she called people and she got people praying. And then people went down there and they were praying and covering it in prayer. And that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. God put it on her heart. She responded. It's part of the body. Kristen and I wanted to reach out to our neighborhood. So on Friday, we had our donuts in the driveway with our neighbors. And we got to meet more neighbors. And we found one neighbor whose husband's very sick and may die. And so we're learning about them, how to pray for them, how to care for them. It was the body doing what it's called to do. We all don't have to focus on the same event. We focus on Jesus Christ and have Him glorified. And when the body will respond to what Jesus leads, because any gift, any leading He has, it's Him that is glorified. And so we had some of the body in one place, some of the body in the other place, bringing Jesus Christ. And God gets back to, that's that whole humility and meekness and patience and bear with one another in love. Because it's easy when you're doing something, because Chris and I could easily say as we're doing the neighborhood thing, everyone should be doing the neighborhood thing. And Jesus is like, have I called you to do it? Well, yeah. Okay. Why don't you just do what I called you to do? And then I'll call other parts of the body to do what they're supposed to do. Yours is not better. Yours is where I've equipped you, I designed you, where I can be glorified. And when the body starts doing this, when they're being taught correctly, when they're in the Word, growing in the Word, the body joins together even stronger. And that's why we get the verses like, the gates of hell will not prevail. But if the body is not strong, if we're each saying, well, yeah, God says to do it this way, but this way, I think if we do it this way, it'll be a little better, go a little better for us. The church will be, stronger. We really need to get the flower committee going, and we need to get this other committee going. It's like, well, the committee's gonna be good, but you don't lose Jesus in all of it. And I've worked at those churches. I called it the committee church. There had to be 15 committees, and I'm like, and the only thing I could see was Jesus was hard to be found in any of those committees. And every committee was the most important committee in the church. And I'm walking around like, oh my goodness. And so when I actually became a church planter and stuff, I made a rule, there will never ever be another committee. There'll be people being led by Jesus Christ and doing it. And that's what, we'll need committee, we need people led by Jesus Christ. And that's what we've done. And even now, we're doing the VBS, and the VBS isn't just working with the kids. We have people who have to make food. We have people who are going to help decorate. We have people who do stuff from home. It's many abilities coming together where Jesus is glorified. And I even love what Kristen's doing with VBS, because she said, most of the people who attend VBS, these kids are already Christians. But most of VBS just focus on becoming a Christian, but most of them are already Christians. I want to just concentrate a little more of teaching these kids how to walk with the Lord. I'm like, and if I teach them how to walk with the Lord, the ones who don't know Jesus are going to see something like, oh, I just get to walk with him too. It's just someone's out there. I'm like, I love what you're doing with this. Yes, run with that. Teaching our kids how to walk. What does it mean to walk with the Lord? What does it look like? And I'm like, that's awesome. Like Christ said, he gets this part of Ephesians, and it's following the rest of Ephesians, we get into good stuff. It's now focusing on us and how we should be responding, and if he's in us and moving us. And Jesus is starting out with, okay, I put these people in place for the unity of the church so you can grow in the Lord. And as you're growing in the Lord, the body will work strong. If the body working strong, we're going to look at the next verses that tell us it's going to look like this, 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 as the body gets stronger and stronger. But Jesus lays it out for how wonderful that he says, you don't have to guess. I'm going to show you what I look like and how I love. And then I'm going to give you the ability to do it because I am in you, my Spirit is in you. And I have it all set up so you don't even have to guess. We'll walk together. And Jesus will be glorified. I love that we answer, it makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. The body's growing because Jesus Christ is the focus. And if Jesus Christ is the focus, you can only grow. There's no other option but to grow when Jesus is the focus. And he brings us back to the table.